I remember when I was like 5 years old and I was in kindergarten and we were just coming in from recess. And my teacher at the time, Miss Elliott, she told us all to sit at our desk and start getting out the crayons and the paper and to draw an image of ourselves. And so I remember so clearly like it was yesterday. I sat down, I draw the outline of like a human being, and then I grabbed the peach crayon and started filling in my skin color. And then I grabbed a yellow crayon and I drew in straight blonde hair on myself. And spoiler alert, I don't that doesn't describe how I looked. And that was the first time, or the earliest I can ever remember me having kind of an insecurity. Obviously that wasn't me. I wasn't drawing myself. I was drawing what I thought a kid looked like, a kid should look like. I wasn't drawing me, I was drawing what I wanted to be. It's unfortunate that's the first show of insecurity that I can remember. And I remember one of my insecurities was my hair. I didn't like my little fro. I didn't like the curls. I didn't like how it was hard to comb through. I could see other kids combing through their hair and I couldn't do it. So I remember I would try to slick my hair back with gel and then put like blonde dye in it to try to make it look blonde. I was trying to change who I was. I thought the Dennis the Menace and Aaron Carter were like what a cool kid looked like. I had so much insecurity about my hair because I didn't see enough examples of people that look like me. And so anyway, why am I sharing that with you? So recently I decided I wanted to challenge myself to make a list of all the insecurities I've had or remember having throughout my life. And in doing that, through looking inwards and becoming more vulnerable with myself, to acknowledge my present and past insecurities, allow me to develop a deeper level of self-discovery and self-awareness and create a deeper bond with myself. So I want to share with you my biggest insecurities throughout my life. One of the first insecurities I remember having was dealing with my ethnicity, trying to understand where I fit in amongst society. Because I'm mixed, I'm half Jamaican and half white. So when I was younger, the insecurity was that I was too dark. I didn't look like everyone else. So it's funny because when you're growing up, you're trying to find your identity. You're trying to find out and understand who you are, who you identify with. For me, being a mixed race, and it's also going to school and seeing that the majority of people there didn't look like me. And when I turned on the TV, a lot of the people on TV didn't look like me. That really caused a challenge for me. Another big insecurity for me that I've dealt with in different ways through my life was the insecurity of not having a father around. And I remember being younger and like dealing with things like Father's Days and going to friends' house and seeing like their version of what a family is and seeing both parents there. It causes you to reflect a lot, especially as a child, because you don't know why there's only one parent in my house, but there's two parents there. And I remember people would bring up like fathers or ask me where my father was, and my response would be like, I don't have a father. And as a kid, like reflecting back, it's funny to think of how ridiculous that was. But as a kid, it's just like, I don't have a father because like there is none around. I've never met the guy. So in my opinion, in my view, I didn't have a father. And so it was a weird dynamic dealing with that, especially at school and stuff when all the kids are making cards to their father. And then for me, I'd usually just make it to my mom. Another insecurity of mine growing up was having to always be the new kid. When I was growing up, we moved around a lot. And so actually in a span of 7 years, I attended 9 different schools. We moved 9 different times in a span of 7 years. So I was constantly being in a state of leaving close friends I made that year and then having to go to another school and be the new kid and make new friends. And if you've ever been the new kid in a school, it's not comfortable because you're trying to again find your friends and find where you belong, and depending on like how you look, sometimes people treat you differently. Now, I'm not exactly the most emotionally mature person, but I do know that emotional maturity begins with being able to look within ourselves and identify the places within us that are a little bit broken, a little bit immature, a little bit underdeveloped. And in doing that, you gain a deeper understanding of yourself. You develop self-awareness. You discover parts of yourself that will help you moving into the future. Just this week, I was introduced to a guy who is kind of weird, he's very weird, very wacky, very all over the place. He reminds me of like Goofy, like the cartoon character Goofy. He's all over the place. But as I was interacting with him, as weird as I was thinking he is, that thought was also complemented with the thought that like this guy is completely secure and confident in himself. He's weird, but he'll poke fun at his own insecurities, but not in that shy, unconfident way. It's in a very confident and secure way, where he completely doesn't care about the opinions of other people. It comes off in a very refreshing way. I couldn't help but think to myself how much happier the world would be if they were as confident and comfortable with themselves, flaws and all, as this guy. And there was almost a little hint of envy in there for me, because I'm watching him and I'm thinking, wow, like, you just don't care. And although I wouldn't want to be as comfortable in public as he is, I couldn't help but find myself wanting to be a little bit more like him, if you can kind of understand what I mean. It's probably not a good idea to be completely open and vulnerable with everyone you interact with, but I do think it's very important to be open and vulnerable with yourself. You know, these insecurities, it's my attempt to reflect within myself and identify, where did all these insecurities come from? Is it something that I gained because society had a standard that I was trying to keep up with? Like, what caused it? What influenced it? And how did it go away when it did? Did it go away with time? Did it go away because I acknowledged it? Did I do anything at all to make it go away? And it's interesting to take that perspective and look inwards. It's challenging, but it's also pretty refreshing. Another insecurity I've had throughout my life started when I was in about grade 6 or 7. And I remember I was in detention and I was sitting there at my desk, and I forget how, but I remember I looked to the right, and this guy that was sitting beside me somehow got around to saying to me that I look like a bird. And I was like, what? A bird? Like, whatever. I just kind of brushed it off. And then I remember going home, and I remember looking in the mirror and like looking at myself like a bird? What do you mean? Like, birds have beaks. Oh, my nose. From that day forward, it was a done deal, it was a wrap. From that day forward, I was insecure about my nose. I never even thought about it before. I've never even looked at myself from the side until that day. That one person with his one little comment caused an insecurity for me that lasted the rest of my life, up to this point almost. I'm always aware of how my nose looks in pictures. Like, that was the beginning of it. And eventually I got over it. Eventually I kind of like accepted it. My face is my face, this is how I look, I'm fine with it. And then like about a month ago now, I got my nose broken. I got elbowed in the nose when I was playing basketball. And so it swelled up, and then once swelling went down, I could see new differences in my nose. I could see like bumps, a bump here and a bump here that wasn't there before, and my nose all of a sudden, to me at least, looks crooked. It's a new insecurity that developed. It's such a small thing in the long run. 2 years from now, I won't even think about it, but it's still a freshly opened insecurity. So it's just something I've dealt with. Ever since that first comment from that guy at detention, I've been insecure about my nose. Another insecurity I've had, probably since I was like 10 years old, is insecurity with my teeth. I had these like typical canine teeth, probably because my teeth aren't all straight, and I didn't get my wisdom teeth taken out till I was an adult. So it caused a lot of like shifts and whatnot, and I never got braces because I knew we couldn't afford it. But as a result of not liking my teeth, I also didn't like to smile. So growing up, and even today, my first reaction is to not smile in pictures. I'd rather just do a little grin than to actually smile. I just never liked my smile, and it's always been an insecurity of mine that I often would not want to admit to myself. I think true self-acceptance is so rare in people today, mostly because a lot of people are so unwilling to acknowledge our insecurities. We're unwilling to shine the light in the dark areas of our mind that house these experiences we've had that cause these insecurities. So as a result of not acknowledging them, they remain insecurities, and they go on to impact our lives in ways that we're not even aware of, just because of the fact that we don't acknowledge it. We don't even identify it as being something that's maybe a little damaged within us. I've never physically written out my insecurities. I've never let it out of my mind. So in making this video and writing out this list, I really had to battle myself, and because my mind naturally wants to avoid the thought. It wants to navigate around it. And it's not easy, it's challenging. And that's probably why I made this video. Being vulnerable enough to make the list, and then take it a step further and be kind of open myself up to possible criticism by sharing it publicly with the world. It's difficult, and that was part of the appeal of making this video. I think other people could relate to it and possibly benefit in the same way. One of the the biggest insecurity I've ever had is one that has taken so much mental energy from me, so much time. It's the one insecurity I had that caused me to, like, step by step, go through every stage of grief. You know how there's like 7 stages of grief? Like every single one, I had to sit there and just battle myself. And that insecurity is hair loss. When I was about 24, 25, I started noticing my hair thinning out in the front. And the first step of grief is denial. So I was just denying it. It's like, oh, it's just whatever. I might have just combed my hair too hard in the shower or something like that. And then I remember I was getting my hair braided, and I was telling the girl that braids my hair, I was like, is it kind of thin back there? She's like, no. It's just where the hair spirals. It's nothing. Every 6 months, there's a noticeable difference. And it's every time I wake up, I remember every single day, I would wake up and knowing I have to go to the washroom and look in the mirror or go take a shower and like comb my hair, I knew that was just gonna cause more and more hair to be lost. I remember walking throughout the day and like anytime I pass a window or a mirror and I see my reflection, I was just super self-conscious and self-aware about how I looked or angles people would see me in. But I'll tell you something, it was also the biggest relief I've ever had in my life. The day I cut my hair was the day I ripped the chains off of my mind. I broke free from this constant stress and emotional grief and mental energy and focus that I was putting into this thing. And it's embarrassing to tell people. When I tell people that the hardest decision I ever made was cutting my hair, like they laugh because it is kind of funny. It's funny because of how much energy that a person can put into something that's really not that big of a deal. If I could tell my old self from like 8 years ago anything, it would be that like when that day comes that you start noticing that like your hair is thinning out more and more, just do yourself a favor and cut it. Because I had long hair, I had really long hair, and it just would have been so much easier to cut it and not go through the few years of just mental strain that I did. And like today, I don't even think about it, but today the only thing I have to deal with is the fact that every few days I have to shave my head, but it's nothing compared to the amount of stress and effort I put into trying to manage and keep my hair. It's crazy. Another insecurity that's quite recent for me is starting to see gray hair, mostly on my neck, which I usually shave anyway, but there's kind of a patch of hair growing, and I'm noticing little like sprinkles of gray hair throughout my beard, like 20 or 30 of them. It's become an insecurity. Probably not because I care what other people think, but it's an insecurity because it's a real sign to me showing that I'm getting older. It's been a thing for us as human beings to try to avoid the effects of aging. And I think for me, it was just one of those things where it's like, I know I'm getting older, but now I'm seeing results of it. When you're a kid, you're excited about getting older because you're seeing yourself getting taller, you're gaining more muscle, or if you're a woman, you're getting some shape or whatever excited you when you're a kid from growing. But now it's like all the ages, all these signs of aging has usually a more negative connotation to it. I'm sure when the day comes that I start seeing wrinkles, it's going to be another insecurity that I'm going to have to work through and eventually normalize and accept and come to terms with. But for now, starting to see gray hairs, as classy as it might make me look, is this insecurity for me right now. So here's my theory. I think it's even more difficult to face your insecurities than it is to face your fears, because it's easier to identify and cope with your fears. It's easier to avoid them. For example, maybe you're on top of a building, you're walking towards the edge, you look down and all of a sudden you get this crazy sensation of danger, and you jump back and okay, cool. Analysis complete. You're afraid of heights. Problem solved. You just avoid high buildings and roller coasters, and you never have to face your fears ever again. I wouldn't recommend doing that, but you could choose not to face that fear ever again. It's not the same with insecurities. Insecurities, on the other hand, are harder to cope with, I believe, for 2 main reasons. The first reason is because it's internal. We can physically separate ourselves from the thing we fear, but an insecurity is an uncertainty or anxiety about ourselves. It's internal. We identify with it. But again, with insecurities, there's no running away from it. There's only 2 things you can do with insecurities. First, you have to acknowledge it. And then you can either work towards changing it if possible. And if it's not possible to change that insecurity, then you have to change the way you think about it. For example, an insecurity I've always had for the majority of my life is an insecurity with my speech. Particularly when I was younger, I had a very difficult time with stuttering, having a lisp, and talking too fast, and kind of like mumbling or murmuring. So those things combined made for a very difficult and embarrassing time. People would constantly be asking me to repeat myself, and I'd go into conversations trying to speak clearly, and then as soon as they asked me to repeat myself, it was just like a shot to the heart. It led to a lot of embarrassing moments, and it's something that I've constantly had to deal with. And so over time, I've worked towards consciously speaking slower, or positioning my tongue the right way in order to not have a lisp. The challenge is, anytime I have a lot to say, or anytime I get emotional, or I'm passionate about something I'm talking about, I end up talking fast, which means I have less opportunity to focus on how I'm speaking, so then my lisp becomes even more stronger. And then I start maybe stuttering more, or not completing my words, so I'm kind of murmuring a little bit, so it's difficult to understand me. So my whole life, it's been a challenge for me. It's been a big insecurity for me, even to this day. Even to the moment before preparing for this video, I was making sure I was drinking a lot of water so that I would be able to speak properly. And I'm pretty sure no one has any idea how much of a struggle it's been internally throughout my life, again, even to this day. And the second reason that I think insecurities are harder to cope with than fears, because there's a stigma around having insecurity. People often don't want to talk about their insecurities. People have a hard enough time acknowledging their insecurities, let alone talking about it, because having or admitting insecurities is viewed as a weakness. A politician isn't going to express their insecurities. Anyone in a position of authority isn't going to express their insecurities because it would cause people to lose confidence in them. And it's unfortunate because it shouldn't be that way, because we all deal with insecurities. As much as I'm willing to quite uncomfortably make a video talking about my insecurities, I certainly wouldn't go into a job interview and express all my insecurities related to the job. I would never get hired that way. I would never have a job that way. Men are kind of known for not wanting to express or share their feelings. Although it's a sign of maturity and it's completely fine, everyone knows that as human beings we have these emotions, the stigma's still there, unfortunately. And so that is the second reason it makes it harder to face your insecurities compared to facing your fears. Because I feel like we all accept that we all have fears, and that's kind of normalized. Insecurities, on the other hand, nobody wants to talk about. Another insecurity I've had is a desire to avoid putting myself in a position where I'm vulnerable, either through an action that I'm taking or things I'm saying or things I'm revealing. Putting myself in a position of vulnerability is something that I've had to deal with throughout my life. I think there's a lot of positives to that in some situations, especially when you're growing up and you're going through a lot of hardships and challenges. For example, moving to a new school every year and having to make new friends. Like, you have to kind of have a little bit of a toughness to you, a mental toughness, in order to deal with that. The problem is when that becomes what's normal, constantly having that shield up. I've found over the years that I want to become more and more the type of person that lets the shield down when it's necessary, when it's not necessary to have it up. Become more vulnerable to myself and to the world. I'm working on it. The thing about insecurities is that it's almost always something that's important to us. It's a big deal to us. But it's not a big deal to the people that we're often worried about being worried about it. People are often so caught up with their own problems and their own insecurities that they have no time to really consider or worry about the thousands of people they're interacting with on a daily basis. As human beings, we're kind of selfish in the sense that we are so concerned with our own problems, with our own life, with our own challenges, with our own goals, that we're not worried about you. You're not worried about me. We're not worried about the problems that everybody else has. So the last thing you need to worry about is what other people might think about you, because they're really not thinking about it. They're not thinking about you. They might recognize something about you for a brief second, and then it's gone out of their mind and they're back to worrying about what they're going to do tonight, or how they're going to find a babysitter for their child, or what they're going to do for their career, or how they're going to find a way to make more money. Like, people are just not worried about your insecurities. So believe me, once you deal with it in your own mind, it's not going to have any impact on your life as a result of what other people are thinking about you. If you're up for it, I would challenge you to try doing the same thing. Make a list, either a physical list or on your phone, a list of all your insecurities, past and present, and challenge yourself to be vulnerable with yourself. You don't have to make a video about it like I did. You don't have to post it online. You don't have to share it with anybody. Just do it with yourself. Take time to reflect within yourself about your own insecurities and come to terms with it. And ask yourself, which of these insecurities, if any, ever had any real impact on your life in reality, not just in your head? How long did it take for some of them to naturally go away? Maybe some of them went away with age as you matured and became an adult. Maybe some of them you realize only ever existed because you were trying to conform to a standard that was set by the society around you. And that it's actually not something that you actually cared about in the first place. Your environment caused you to care about it. Maybe you realize that it's something that you just can't do anything about, and the only option is to change the way you think about it. I think making yourself aware of your insecurities is an act of self-discovery, and it won't be comfortable. It's gonna be challenging, but you might just find that it's gonna be a bit healing and a bit therapeutic in a very cringy way, because nobody wants to look their insecurities right in the face. But I think for your mental health, it will help you going forward. This is the first video for me of 2020, and one of my goals for my videos in this channel going forward is to share more about me, be more real, be more vulnerable, and hopefully create content that you can relate to. I'm a big believer in the importance of self-discovery and personal development, and that's what this channel is going to be about in 2020. And so if you want to see more content of this style, please let me know by hitting the like button below. It lets me know how many of you are actually interested in this, and I want to make more content that you like. And when you hit the like button, it helps support the channel by telling YouTube that this is something that's worth watching, and to push it out to more people, and I'd appreciate that. Let me know down in the comments below. Leave a comment with at least one insecurity that you've faced throughout your life, and let that be the beginning of you making your list. Thanks for sticking around. Peace.